This is USVI News, your Virgin Islands connection.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for USVI News. I'm Haley Potter. You may have heard the sirens on St. Thomas or St. Croix on Thursday. Multiple government agencies and first responders were taking part in a test exercise for VITEMA. It was to help emergency responders prepare in the case of an active shooter. USVI News' Ali Bornvanak was at Eudora Keene High School for the exercise and has the story for us.
Haley, we knew this test exercise for VITEMA and first responders in the territory was coming, but the details have been kept very under wraps. As you can see, there is a lot of activity going on here, as well as another exercise happening on St. Croix. The purpose of this is to help prepare first responders in the event there is an active shooter on scene.
We're doing a scenario, active shooter scenario at Eudora Keene High School, where some individuals were shot. So right now the officers of them are role-playing, simulating mass casualties and how to evaluate the students that would involve shooting.
It's very, very important because if you look around now, this active shooter and mass shooting that happened, if you look at Columbine back then, you have the active shooter still happened in Las Vegas a couple of years ago, and we have to make sure that our first responders are ready and capable of handling a situation like that, especially in a school setting. Because our school setting is one of the most vulnerable places. We have our children going to school, kids, and it's an easy target to come. So it's very important that we know what to do in case of this thing, something like this happen here in the territory.
And I'm also told that a very important part of this test exercise is having school monitors here observing and watching, because they're the ones who are here on the ground making sure that everything stays safe. In St. Thomas, Ali Bornvanak, USVI News.
Thank you, Ali, for that report. In St. Croix, police arrested a man for carrying an unlicensed firearm during a violent crime. The VIPD charged 27-year-old Troy Hazel of Castleburg for carrying a firearm. Hazel is accused of pointing a firearm several times at his mother's partner during a disagreement and discharging the firearm outside of the residence as he left. He is on a $100,000 bail, which he could not post. He's in custody of the Bureau of Corrections pending his hearing. Congresswoman Plaskett and Governor Bryan met with leadership in Congress to discuss initiatives critical to the Virgin Islands. Congresswoman Plaskett says she returned to the nation's capital to support legislation for benefits for working families and to advocate for President Biden's historic agenda. She hosted Governor Albert Bryan and focused on the Build Back Better Act, which will include popular initiatives to create more jobs, cut taxes for families, and lower health care costs, and do so by making the wealthiest and big corporations pay their fair share. Plaskett is hoping a bill like this will help the Virgin Islands and other territories by making sure they are treated equal and have the opportunity to use this legislation to advance their much-needed areas. Across the country, new COVID-19 infections are up 12% in the past week, leaving hospitals struggling to cope with the rise in cases. USVI News' Hunter Vaughn has the latest.
Johnson & Johnson is the latest COVID-19 vaccine manufacturer recommending a booster shot. The company releasing early clinical trial data supporting a second dose 8 months after the original shot to boost its single-shot vaccine.
The data that we're seeing emerge suggests that a second shot of the J&J has a profound effect on your antibody levels.
Meanwhile, Pfizer has formally started the application process for FDA approval of its booster. The push for additional shots as more Americans are receiving their first dose. According to a CDC report, unvaccinated people are 29 times more likely to be hospitalized, as medical centers across the country are seeing their ICU units fill up with COVID cases.
It's been very sad, very hard. Every shift now we see people who are struggling to breathe.
There's always a nurse kind of right here, ready to intervene at any moment.
Across Oregon, medical units are pushed to their limit. NBC's Portland affiliate KGW got exclusive access inside the ICU at 2 hospitals.
Our physicians are just being called at every opportunity. Can you take this patient? Can you help us consult on this patient? This patient is 26 and dying.
The state is now issuing an outdoor mask mandate to combat the spread, while across the country, new cases continue to soar. Hunter Vaughn, USVI News.
And as the world continues to grapple with the spike in COVID-19 infections, Delta Airlines says it will charge employees on the company health plan extra money if they do not get their vaccine. Those employees will be charged $200 a month starting on November 1st. The carrier said the high cost to cover employees who become hospitalized with COVID-19 caused them to make this change. Some bills can be on average $50,000. Indoor masking is also effective immediately, and at the end of September, COVID pay protection will only be provided to fully vaccinated employees experiencing a breakthrough infection. And we now have more information to the COVID-19 related death on a cruise ship that we told you about earlier this week. We now know a 77-year-old woman has died from COVID-19 after testing positive while sailing on a Carnival cruise to Belize. That woman died on August 14th. According to the New York Times, the woman departed on the Carnival Vista with her family on July 31st and tested positive for COVID-19 after experiencing respiratory complications. She was admitted to a hospital and put on a ventilator before being evacuated to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and receiving treatment there. And in the state capitol, lawmakers in the Biden administration crafted the American Rescue Plan. Our Washington correspondent, Matt Knadler, is digging deeper for us to see how federal officials think that money should be spent. Matt?
The U.S. Treasury oversees just how state and local governments can spend the $350 billion they are receiving in American Rescue Plan relief money. Earlier this year, they offered interim guidance on those rules. We first brought you that story back in June.
It's going to make it possible for an awful lot of educators, first responders, sanitation workers to go back to work.
So I reached out to the Treasury Department over the last week or so to see if those rules have changed. Officials declined an on-camera interview for our story, but a Treasury spokesperson tells me our local governments should continue relying on that interim rule as they begin receiving and spending their money. So we looked into the 39-page roadmap of sorts to see if Treasury and the Biden administration suggest local officials spend that money in one key area. And as it turns out, the list of eligible uses is actually pretty long and at points also pretty broad, with 4 main eligible use categories: public health and aid to those economically impacted by the pandemic, premium pay for essential workers, offsetting pandemic-related tax revenue losses in the last fiscal year, and infrastructure upgrades.
For 3,000 counties in America, we're seeing 3,000 different ideas about how to improve their residents' lives locally.
Mark Rattacco is with the National Association of Counties here in Washington, D.C. He says the language is intentionally vague because some counties were hit harder than others by COVID, meaning they will have different needs moving forward.
And that's what we are counting on all of America's 3,069 counties to do, which is to invest this money wisely and efficiently in these types of services that our residents say they need to be prosperous in the 21st century.
There are 2 areas where relief funds cannot be used: padding pension programs, and states and territories cannot use the money to cut taxes. Now, there is one other option for local and county governments to get the most bang for their buck: pooling their money together.
If there's a local municipality that doesn't really have the need for the money they were given, can they give it to the county and almost earmark it for like collectively, can they earmark it for an internet project, a broadband project?
Intergovernmental transfers are allowed in Treasury's interim final rule. Maybe a town or a city will transfer money to a county for a large broadband project, or a state, county, and a city would pool their money together to enter a public-private partnership with a local service provider.
Treasury officials tell me that of the $350 billion approved in the American Rescue Plan, over $230 billion has already been sent to states, territories, and localities. In Washington, Matt Knadler reporting.
Thank you, Matt. And the U.S. State Department warned Americans still in Afghanistan to stay away from the airport because of a terrorist threat. Time is running out to evacuate the 1,500 Americans still in the country, as well as tens of thousands of Afghan allies who helped the U.S. during the war effort. Meanwhile, 2 explosions rocked the area outside of the Kabul airport, leaving a number of casualties and throwing evacuation efforts into more turmoil. Meanwhile, the Pentagon says that 12 U.S. service members have been killed in the chaos and at least 15 were injured in the airport attack.